I wanted to talk a little bit about debt that you have within your company, because it's always amazing to me when I initially start talking with somebody, as a consultant type situation or coaching situation, whatever you want to call it. You know, I try to find out where somebody's at. Are things paid for? Are things not paid for? What's your income? What's your debt? How long is this long-term debt, short-term debt? What type of debt you got going on? And then you look on some of these social media posts, and it just drives me crazy sometimes, enough to where I wanted to talk about it for a few minutes today, where they'll say, well, how deep in debt are you? And all of a sudden, all these guys start chiming in, and contractors start chiming in. This guy says initially he says, I'm just trying my best to keep things paid for. And that's not a problem. But I think it goes much deeper than that. Another guy says, hey, man, I always just try to keep, and I'm not reading these verbatim, but I mean, just a couple notes I've got so I could remember some of these to discuss them with you guys. It's like, I always try to get everything and own it outright, so my overhead is as close to zero as possible. I always shoot to own everything outright, so your overhead is close to zero as possible. Now, anybody that believes your overhead's zero because you've got your equipment paid for, you certainly need to tune into Turfs Up Radio 24/7 and don't get any sleep, because you're going to be educated and elevated to a better knowledge pack than that. But a lot of people think that I've got it paid for, so I don't have any overhead. There's always replacement cost on equipment, not to mention everything else that goes along with it. It's great to have your truck paid for, but guess what? That truck's not going to last forever. So if you're not charging accordingly to replace that truck at some point, guess what? When it comes time to replace it, you're not going to have it. Or you say, well, I got my lawnmowers paid for, or I got my seeder paid for, I got my Z-spray paid for. Well, Wayne, I don't have that expense. You don't have a payment. But what you're going to have to do is replace it down the road. So don't think you don't have overhead. And let's just for 1 second play that game, if you will. Let's play that game for just a second. And your truck's paid for, your equipment's paid for, everything's paid for, but you're never going to hit a zero overhead. I think, well, Wayne, I've got zero overhead. Really? Do you have a cell phone? Do you have letterhead? Do you have envelopes? Do you have any expense that your company pays for is overhead? Some people's may be lower than others, but you're never going to hit a zero overhead. Just not going to happen. Not going to happen. I appreciate the text you guys are shooting in. Just the thing is, we got to understand, and for the sake of time today, we're not going to get real far into this, but there's 3 levels of expenses that we think about. And those are direct cost, indirect cost, and additional overhead. Not to mention what your desired profit margin is. And that's what we got to think about, because if we don't think about desired profit margin, and that's why we're all in business, is to make a profit, right? It's not just about doing the work. We're in business to make a profit. So what are the direct costs of that equipment? That's the cost, and it doesn't matter what type of equipment it is. It's Okay, you buy a Z spray, and I'm just going to make a number up, for $15,000 or $12,000 or whatever. Okay, well, did you pay for it outright? Did you finance it? Those are the costs associated with owning that equipment that aren't going to change. Your indirect costs are the things that will change based on the use pattern that you have or use rates that you have on that equipment. Fuel, maintenance, repairs. Okay? So even though you got a lawnmower paid for and maybe you don't have a payment going out on that particular piece of equipment, you're still going to have the indirect cost of ownership of that. You're also going to have the additional overhead of everything that it takes to run your business other than fuel, maintenance, and repairs on equipment and labor and insurance. All those things are all calculated within our know why you charge what you charge spreadsheet that we've got for you. But I mean, those are just things we got to think about. So don't think that, hey man, I've got that equipment paid for, my overhead's nil. Absolutely not. And how many times don't you buy a piece of equipment? And that's why when you're running equipment through like our sheet, and I'm not saying you got to use our spreadsheets, our cost recovery sheets, but it not only says what'd you pay for it, but it says replacement cost right there on the front line, very first line. Because how many things do we buy today that when we replace them 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever down the line, 5 years down the line, are we going to spend the same amount of money on it? Probably not. But if you're out there bidding jobs based on, I don't have a payment, you're just positioning yourself for failure. And that's what I don't want to see you guys do. We got to think about it. Think about it in terms of direct, indirect, additional overhead, desired profit. And know going into that what you anticipate or what you want your profit to be. Got to put your thinking cap on a little bit. But what I want us all to do is get out of that mindset that I'm smaller, I can do it cheaper. And that's what's keeping you restricted within your company. And again, I guess maybe this whole 53 minutes that I've been on here on Profit Time today has seemed like a negative Nancy show, but it's not intended that way. I want you to understand that 99% of what you read in social media and a whole lot of what you hear on podcast out there by these podcast cowboys is a bunch of BS. But there's some good stuff out there. I'm not just saying it's just good here on Turfs Up Radio. I'm just saying you got to be able to listen and know what's right or wrong and not be influenced by somebody that doesn't know what the hell they're talking about. And there's a whole lot more knowledge being shared out there in a lot of different formats from people that don't know what they don't know about the information that they're trying to share with somebody. Turfs Up Radio offers you a solid source of information to grow your business. I can honestly say that all the contributors on Turfs Up Radio have got the experience, have got the knowledge to help you change your business if you want to change your business. What you have to do is set your own goals, both short-term, medium, long-term. We're not getting into goals today. But you've got to set your own goals to make that happen. But don't get lost, whether you're a one-truck operation or a two-truck operation or a million-truck operation. All of us think initially, I'm small, I can do it cheaper. It's exactly opposite of that. And I'd be happy to show you on paper in a math standpoint on why that is absolutely correct. Why that's absolutely correct. You think you don't have, maybe you don't have the building, maybe you don't have 10 employees or 20 employees or 50 employees or whatever. But what you do have, let's just say you're a single truck operator, regardless of what service you're providing. You've got truck, equipment, labor, additional overhead, desired profit. And until you sit down for yourself and believe and understand that, you might as well be throwing a dart at the dartboard when it comes to pricing your jobs.